Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Great to be here.
You brought If We Were Villains to our attention. And we've been really eager to dive into what makes it tick, why everyone's talking about it. So today, we're going to explore the intense world of Dellecher Classical Conservatory.
Right.
And those dramatic events surrounding the 7 main students there.
Yeah, it's quite a setup.
Our goal, really, is just to give everyone a clear sense of the story's core, the plot points, the themes, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Absolutely. And I think starting with the setting itself, Dellecher, is key.
Okay.
It's this incredibly isolated, elite place. Life there just revolves entirely around Shakespeare classical theater.
Yeah.
And that kind of insular environment, it just ramps up all the emotions, the relationships, everything.
It sounds like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And inside that, you've got these 7 fourth-year acting students living together in this place called the Castle.
That's right. And they're the survivors, They made it through this ruthless cutting process, as the book calls it.
Wow.
So they're already a tight-knit group, but also, intensely competitive. Their whole lives are steeped in Shakespearean verse.
And they seem to fall into these very specific types, don't they? Both in casting and maybe in life.
Oh, definitely. Take Oliver Marks. He's our narrator.
Right.
He's usually cast in supporting roles. The loyal friend, kind of the quiet observer. He even notes his own lack of assertiveness, how he watches from the sidelines.
And then you have Richard Sterling.
Richard. Always the villain. He's got the looks, the charisma, but there's this real streak of, cruelty and ego there. Manipulative.
The whole opposite seems to be James Farrow.
Exactly, the hero type. Good-looking, noble, always the protagonist. He's positioned right away as Richard's main rival, maybe the moral compass, or so it seems at first.
And Meredith Dardenne.
The temptress. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, always playing those femme fatales. Very glamorous, very dramatic.
Okay, then Philip Acosta.
Philippa's the good girl, thoughtful, more reserved, often playing the virtuous roles. She's frequently the voice of reason in the group.
Seems like they need one. What about Alexander Lynn?
Alexander's the comedian, the witty, charming clown or jester figure, but you definitely get the sense there's more going on beneath that humor.
Right. And lastly, Ren Sterling.
The ingenue, sweet, innocent, usually plays the young heroines. She seems quite fragile, and crucially, she's Richard's cousin, which adds complications.
Definitely adds a layer. And it's telling how their first big show, Julius Caesar, locks them into these types, doesn't it?
It really is. James is Brutus, the noble guy pushed too far. Richard is Cassius, the envious manipulator. Oliver as Casca, sort of swept along. It perfectly mirrors their dynamic.
You can already feel the tension building there.
Yeah.
Richard's jealousy of James getting the lead roles.
Yeah, that's simmering.
And Oliver's unspoken thing for Meredith, who's with James at the time. That's got to be awkward.
It adds so much underlying friction, and it all kind of boils over after that Julius Caesar show at the party.
The party, right.
Richard just publicly goes after James about Meredith. It's brutal. Leads to a physical fight, and bam, the friendships are pretty much fractured right there.
A real turning point. And then comes the Macbeth casting. Talk about throwing fuel on the fire.
Oh, totally. The Dean casting Richard as Macbeth the lead, the ambitious protagonist, and James as Macduff, the secondary hero. Huge shockwaves.
Richard must have loved that.
Oh, he did. You see his triumph, but it also seems to unleash something darker in him. His behavior gets worse, more disdainful, especially towards Oliver. The group starts splitting into factions.
But interestingly, Oliver and James get closer during this time.
Yeah, it seems like they bond over their shared disappointment, maybe their ambitions. It pushes Oliver even further away from Richard, though.
And how are the Macbeth performances? Do they reflect this?
In a way, yes. Richard's Macbeth was apparently technically brilliant, but cold. James's Macduff, on the other hand, was deeply human, full of pathos. It's like their acting mirrored their personalities, or maybe the roles were bleeding into real life.
Life imitating art, or art imitating life.
Something like that. And it all comes to another head at the final Macbeth party.
Oh boy, another part.
Yeah, lots of drinking, emotions running super high. Richard starts laying into everyone, just hitting all their weak spots with these targeted insults.
He sounds charming.
Not quite. And during this big blow-up, a couple of major things come out, like Richard's affair with Philippa.
Ooh, okay, the good girl.
Exactly. Shows another side to both of them, and more of Richard's manipulation.
And then it gets physical again.
It does.
Yeah.
Richard shoves James. James falls back or crashes into a glass table. Richard just storms off in a rage, heading towards the lake outside.
Freezing cold out there, right?
It is. And the others follow him. The confrontation continues by the lake. Richard attacks James again. Meredith gets pushed aside. And then, during the struggle, Richard falls into the freezing lake.
Oh, wow.
And this is the truly critical moment. They just watch him, he's struggling, then he sinks.
They don't help him.
Oliver asks, shouldn't we help him? But there's just silence. They let him drown. A collective failure to act.
That's chilling.
It is. And immediately after, the panic sets in, and they have to decide what to do. Meredith argues for covering it up. Philippa points out the practicalities. Alexander spots a security guard.
So they make a pact.
They do. They agree to say Richard left the party alone, went off by himself.
And when his body is found, the official ruling is accidental drowning.
Correct. It seems like they got away with it. But the spring semester that follows is just thick with guilt and suspicion.
I can imagine. How does it affect each of them?
They all struggle differently. James becomes really withdrawn. Meredith starts drinking heavily. Alexander tries to joke his way through it, but it's strained. Philippa is pragmatic but burdened. Wren is just fragile.
And Oliver, the narrator.
Oliver's reaction is really interesting. He feels the guilt, definitely, but also this unsettling sense of relief now that Richard is gone. It forces him to look at himself, his own capacity for darkness, maybe.
Sure. And then comes the final play, King Lear. The casting seems significant again.
Hugely significant. Oliver, the perennial supporting actor, gets cast as Edmund, the scheming, ambitious villain, a role Richard would normally have played.
Wow, and James.
James is Edgar, the virtuous son who gets wronged. The irony is thick.
Meanwhile, there's still the police investigation.
Yeah, Detective Colborne, he never quite bought the accident story. He keeps showing up, asking questions, focusing more and more on James. It puts immense strain on the group.
Does anyone bond through this?
Oliver and Philippa actually grow closer. Maybe it's the shared secret, this need to protect James, who Colborne seems to be zeroing in on.
And the play itself, King Lear, must resonate with them.
Oh, absolutely. All the themes, betrayal, madness, lies, consequences, it's mirroring their lives in this incredibly uncomfortable way.
How does Oliver handle playing the villain, Edmund?
He gets disturbingly good at it. He really throws himself into the role, almost becomes Edmund. It unnerves James, leading to this intense confrontation where they both sort of admit, maybe just for a second, that they wanted Richard dead.
That's heavy.
It shows how far they've all been pushed morally. And then Wren has a complete breakdown during rehearsal. She implies she might hurt herself. The pressure is just immense.
But they make it to opening night of Lear.
They do. And despite everything, the performances are supposedly incredibly powerful. Oliver feels like he's dying on stage as Edmund each night.
And then
right after the final performance, Detective Colborne shows up again. This time, he makes it clear he thinks James is his prime suspect.
Oh, no. So James is about to take the fall.
It looks that way.
Yeah.
And Oliver sees this happening. He realizes James, ever the hero, is probably going to confess, even though it wasn't just him.
So what does Oliver do?
Oliver steps up. He understands his own type, the supporting role. He figures the story needs a villain for the outside world.
He confesses.
He does. He goes to Colborne and constructs this whole story where he claims he alone was responsible for Richard's death, that the others weren't even there by the lake. A total fabrication, but a sacrifice.
Does Colborne buy it?
He's skeptical, definitely. But Oliver's story fits enough of the facts, and maybe it's just easier. The authorities eventually accept it. Oliver's arrested for manslaughter.
And the others?
At the trial, they have to testify. They're forced to back up Oliver's false story. It's agonizing for them. James apparently tries to confess himself, tries to take responsibility, but his testimony is dismissed because Oliver already confessed.
So Oliver's convicted.
Convicted and sentenced. There's this moment in the courtroom, a final look between him and his friends, and there's this shared understanding passing between them. They know the truth. He took the fall for all of them.
Wow. Okay, fast forward 10 years. Oliver gets out.
Yep. And one of the first people he meets is Detective Colborne, now retired.
Does he tell Colborne the truth?
Not the exact mechanics, but he explains why he confessed. He talks about their collective responsibility, how they were all involved in different ways, and how he chose to play the villain role that the narrative seemed to require.
Does he find out what happened to the others?
He does. Colborne fills him in. James is now a successful director. Meredith's made it as a film actress. Alexander teaches theater. Philippa does voice acting. And Wren became a theater therapist.
Interesting paths. Does Colborne ask the big question?
He does. Did Richard deserve to die?
And Oliver's answer?
It's nuanced. He says Richard was cruel, yes, deeply flawed, but ultimately, no, he didn't deserve to die. It highlights the tragedy of it all, Richard's life and his death.
So is that the end?
Not quite. There's an epilogue set 6 months after Oliver's release.
Okay. What's he doing?
He's working as a dramaturg for James in Chicago.
Whoa. Full circle.
Kind of. He's reconnecting with Philippa and Wren too. Meredith and Alexander still a bit distant, but they're in touch.
Do they talk about?
They do, finally. Wren offers some insights about Richard from her therapy work. They have this open conversation about the guilt they all still carry. James reflects on that intense rivalry with Richard. Philippa shares her own conflicted memories.
Does anyone ask Oliver if he regrets confessing?
Wren does. Straight up asks him if he regrets taking the blame.
And
he says no. No regrets. He believes he played the part that was needed at the time, the villain.
So what's the final note?
Oliver reveals he's decided to publish his manuscript, the story we've just read, essentially, but under a pseudonym, If We Were Villains.
Ah, the title.
Exactly. Not as an exposé, he says, but more as a testament to how blurry the lines are between hero and villain, the nature of tragedy. And he feels hopeful, finally free from having to play that villain role in his own life.
What a story. We've really only scratched the surface here, haven't we? But hopefully this gives everyone a good feel for the intensity, the complex relationships, the moral questions in If We Were Villains.
Yeah, the guilt, the responsibility, how fine that line between good and bad can be. It makes it a really compelling read.
Absolutely. To really get the full experience, you definitely need to read it yourself. You can grab a copy of If We Were Villains using the link in our description.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the literary world, please do subscribe to Books and Bytes. We'll be back with more discussions on stories that make you think.